Good morning. We are going to step into territory that is very emotional for a lot of people because every year more than 2,500 babies are born still in our country. That's 6 babies daily. That's one baby, one family every 4 hours. Yet stillbirth is often rarely talked about. In fact, I went to a fundraising event last year raising awareness of stillbirth and was told that in the crowd was a 70-year-old lady who had never ever spoken about the pain that she went through. That night I also met our next guest, Claire Foord, who was South Australian or local hero of the year last year and is also founder of stillaware.org. It's a program that's committed to bringing awareness to the tragedy of having a baby born still. And yesterday she presented in Queensland at the Australian launch of the global medical journal, one of the biggest, who have launched a series looking into this issue. Good morning, Claire.
Good morning, Ali. Thanks.
And thank you for rushing in. I know that you were stuck on Nottage Terrace for a while there, so yes. If she's out of breath, that's what it's all about. Before we get into what you learnt yesterday and some of the ways forward in this, can you perhaps take us through a little bit what happened to you and your husband Brad and Alfie?
Yeah, sure. Alfie was a perfect little baby, and I remember her so very, very well. I knew her little movements, every tumble, every little dance inside me as she grew into what was a perfect little angel. 37 weeks, we were told the baby could arrive at any moment. I had pre-labour contractions, and I wasn't aware that this was a reason for concern. Her movement started to decrease. Again, I wasn't aware that this was a reason for concern. I asked the doctor multiple times, is this normal to be having regular pre-labour contractions? And I was never given a straight answer. Instead asked, can you cope? How are you coping with the pain? The question was never about my child. I feel that if we knew about monitoring a baby's movement in utero and responding to that accordingly, our baby would be here and our little girl Alfie would be here in my arms and running around and giggling, rather than being in my arms in the hospital after one of the most agonising things I've ever had to experience, which is birthing a baby in silence in a hospital. It's completely intense, fully formed, 40-week-old, 9-month-old baby, holding her in my arms and having to say goodbye, looking at her, kissing her, loving her, and having to give her back and leave her there, walking out of that hospital with an empty heart and empty arms. It still is incredibly painful, and I think will be forever. But that little piece of me that belongs to her, that emptiness in my heart, is her space, and it's for her and for the 6 babies every day that are delivered still, that are born, but born without breath, that Stillaware exists. And that's why I am doing what I am doing and trying to raise awareness to the fact prior to birth to save these babies, because it is preventable. There is preventable stillbirth, and I do not understand why we won't talk about it.
The emotion that I think we're all feeling now in the studio is obvious. The prevention, let's talk about that. Why is it that Australia has a higher rate, and so much higher rate, of preventable stillbirth than other developed countries?
I think it's a lack of a continued level of care, a continuity of care. I think that we have known about monitoring the movements, perhaps not as mothers and as a community, but the medical profession have known about counting the kicks, for example, for more than 20 years. In 20 years, there has been no reduction in stillbirth in Australia because it hasn't been acted on actively. What we do know is that when a baby is unwell or in distress, it will move less. This is in utero, not as strong and not as often. And that is a reason to speak up and say, my baby, there's something wrong, I need to be checked.
And not feel like you're being a nuisance, not
Correct.
Feel, they're going to think, I'm a first-time mum, I'm just jumping at shadows.
Exactly. And look, I think it has to come from, initially it has to be a full community level where we all speak up. We all give these thousands of babies a year a voice, our voice, because they can't speak for themselves. But it does have to come from the government as well. And there is certainly policies and reviews that need to happen. particularly where the Department of Health is concerned, and eventually the Prime Minister has to get on board too and change some of the ways we look at it from a global health perspective.
So tell us about that step forward that you took yesterday, and then we might actually take a break and get quickly to the news because I want to come back and continue this conversation with you. So tell us a little bit about that step forward you took yesterday.
Yeah, so yesterday it was really exciting. The Lancet, which is the largest global medical health journal in the world, has launched not only a study on stillbirth, but results, findings about ending preventable stillbirth globally. So this is really, really exciting and a huge step forward in research and also solidifying what we are saying as Still Aware, that stillbirth can often be preventable and that we should be taking action on this and doing something about it.
This is Mornings.
Mornings with Ali Clarke.
On 891 ABC Adelaide.
And it's not just me in the studio this morning. I've been joined by Claire Foord, the founder of stillaware.org. Claire and her husband Brad experienced the stillbirth of their daughter Alfie, and since then she's made it her mission to try to get people talking about stillbirth. We just found out yesterday that basically it is now irrefutable that a lot of these stillbirths, one family goes through this every 4 hours in Australia. A lot of them can be prevented. That's
Right, particularly in the third trimester. What has been shown in the top rating countries who have taken this as a continuity of care across the board from a government perspective, but educating mothers in the third trimester and families to monitor a baby's movements, get to know their individual movement patterns and report any changes in that, has reduced stillbirth by up to 50% in some countries. If we follow that of the best performing Western country, we can reduce stillbirth conservatively by 200 babies, save 200 lives each year in Australia just through mothers monitoring their baby in utero, self-monitoring, speaking up, empowering themselves to ask to be checked, not to wait 20 minutes, an hour, 10 hours, 2 days, to go straight in and be checked. They're not wasting anybody's time and they could just be saving their baby's life.
Do you think people don't talk about this because they don't know how to talk to you about it? It's very confronting, I would imagine, for a loved one, a friend, to be able to speak to you and come up to you after you lost Alfie, after everybody celebrates your pregnancy with you.
Well, I think part of that in the celebration of pregnancy is our duty of care to our friends, family, anyone actually in the community, to not necessarily scare them by saying, oh my goodness, your baby could be stillborn, but rather say, did you know that you can get to know your baby while it's inside you, that your baby has a little personality, a little kicks and in rolls and pokes that is as of a routine, and you can get to know that because it can prevent adverse outcomes of pregnancy. It's not about scaring, it's about empowering that.
And so if anyone's listening and they have a granddaughter or a daughter or a friend who is pregnant, that is something small they can do.
Absolutely, and it could just save many, many lives.
And if you want more information too, head to stillaware.org. This is Claire's foundation, and there's an absolute, as you can hear, an absolute commitment to fixing this issue.
Absolutely. We're not going to be taking this lying down, and it is preventable. And this new Lancet series is a voice of hope for stillbirth and change in preventable stillbirth in Australia. So thank you so much, Ali, for taking the time.
Not at all. Thanks for sharing your story.